hello, and welcome to tonight's show. It's so good to be back. The lungs are clearer now than they have been for the last 2 weeks, and so that means we get to play. We absolutely do. Now, of course, most of you are, I'm assuming, winding down your long year of 2023, getting ready for perhaps a bit of a break, perhaps not. Maybe making some time to play some extra role-playing games. Who knows? All I do know is that I hope that you all have an absolutely wonderful time whilst doing it. My holiday officially starts at the end of today's stream. I will be taking a brief break of about 2 weeks, give or take. And this time, hopefully, it won't be filled with all sorts of dreaded lurgy and things. Now, some good news. I found my notes. That's right, I found my notes. For whatever reason, I had written them at the back of my other campaign, which also wrapped up this last Sunday in a very fun kind of conclusion to a year and a half's worth of game play. So there is that happening. Now, I'm currently running a poll for those of you that can do polls within the chat. And the reason why I'm doing that, and this is secret information now, shared just between you, me, and everybody who watches this. I've put together a group of role players, and we're going to be doing some live role playing, D&D 5th edition, coming in the future, in January, as a matter of fact. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. But the question I had for you is, in this new role playing spirit, would you be interested? And I see a lot of people have already done this, have already started the poll, which is great, absolutely great, and that's wonderful. But I'm actually going to restart it. I'm going to restart it because I didn't actually ask the question. And the question that I'm asking you is, would you want to see 2 streams, Tuesday night, Thursday night, I don't know, 1 Star Trek solo play and 1 with a group of people? Is that something that you would be interested in? The answer is a yes or no type of question. I'm just going to put that up there. Just putting it out there. This is basically an idea that's rattling around my head. I don't know if it's sustainable or not, but I'm having so much fun doing these solo games that I thought, you know what? Maybe it's something that we just carry on doing, even though we are also running a live game, with multiple players and a more traditional role-playing experience, D&D experience, as opposed to just the solos. Now, the alternative, once we've decided what we're going to be doing, is we either carry on with this sort of Star Trek approach, in which case I promise, absolutely Vulcan promise, to absorb more of the solo rules so that I can be a lot more flexible and a lot more inclusive, I guess, in the whole thing. Or do we go back to the Lone Wolf books, if you remember those read-throughs of the Lone Wolf books? So I'm torn myself. Not entirely sure what to do there. But let's see. So, are 2 streams sustainable? I don't know. I don't want to suffer from burnout. That happens. But at the same time, I really do just enjoy doing these. Right. Enough of that now. Let's get on with the actual show. And I do wish that I could have some fancy voiceover person. Well, actually, I suppose I could, because now that I've found my notes, the recap is going to come from Jonathan Backus, the Chief Medical Officer. Chief Medical Officer's log supplemental. We've now been down on this station, exposed to all manner of gamma radiation for the past hour, whilst the ambassador and the first officer have been attempting to divert power from the system, which apparently appears to be suffering from a cascade overflow, and are attempting to prevent this overflow from causing a core meltdown, which they believe would trigger the destruction of the entire planet and possibly even the entire star system. We have not had contact with the USS Plato since we beamed down due to the interference from the gamma radiation. And I fear that our exposure to this radiation, the longer we are here, the worse the exposure becomes, the greater the risk to our lives. Whilst I appreciate that Starfleet is all about taking risk, I have to question whether taking risk to save an uninhabited population of rocks is worth the risk of the 4 Starfleet officers that are part of this crew. I can only hope that the USS Plato is gathering valuable data and is not sustaining any damage at all. End Chief Medical Officer's log for now. The USS Plato is currently licking her wounds in the asteroid field in which she has taken refuge. Now, if you recall, we tried a battle with the Ferengi that came rushing in under Daemon Methlik, and the Ferengi certainly taught us a lesson. They taught us a very, very valuable lesson. Our little ship is underpowered and undermatched. We cannot take on a Decora-class Ferengi cruiser, even if I wasn't even using the actual Decora-class stats. So the Plato is hiding, and this is where we find ourselves. Now, I have been amiss. I have not done what I should be doing, which is to say that I am using the Star Trek Adventures Captain's Log solo role-playing game. Do not be deceived by the gigantically thick rulebook. I would say a good 80% of that is literally just lore. It is just data, just giving you background and then character creation. The actual rules themselves are fairly meager, which is a good thing. They don't get in the way. But it is the random tables that build this whole system. And that's kind of where we're at the moment. Now, our original build has changed significantly from what we thought it was going to be, which is absolutely fine, because that's usually how these things play out, is that things change. And why shouldn't they? Who says things have to stay static? As a game master, I will tell you that whatever plot we might have, originally we were going to be extraditing some prisoner, and it was going to be a political kind of thing. Well, that certainly changed it, hasn't it? So there you are. There you are. Right, Richard Gilson asking the eternal question, is it data, is it lore, or is it B4? Well, depends on what series you've watched, I suppose. No spoilers here. Anyway. The Admiral, what Admiral? There's no Admiral. The Ambassador looks over at the first officer. I believe that we have managed to shunt some of the power from the primary engines of this structure, giving us some time before we will have to do this again. However, I feel that I should point out, I have now enough data to make a hypothesis on what this entire structure is for. The first officer casts a wary eye over at this ambassador who sometimes talks a bit too much. What is it, Ambassador? Is this some kind of mega weapon? Is this something that will be used against the Federation, or is this something that we should dismantle? I believe this entire structure was built by the proto-Vulcans, those that separated from Vulcan thousands of years ago in an attempt to avoid Surak's teachings of logic. Now, we know for a fact, thanks to the works of Ambassador Spock, that the Vulcans and the Romulans had this schism. But I think that there was a third branch. That branch made it here, to this planet. And I believe that this entire structure was designed to amplify the mind-melding mind effects, or the telepathy, the psychic abilities of the Vulcans, at least the builders of this device. The medical officer stands up, having stopped administering help to the delusional science officer. Well, I mean, that's all good and well, Ambassador, but quite frankly, I don't see what difference that kind of makes. I mean, unless it's the Romulans who are after this thing, I don't think Vulcans would be tampering around with that kind of technology, do you? No, I quite agree. I don't think that they would be at all. However, I do suspect that leaving a device like this intact is opening the doors to all kinds of exploitation. It is exactly at that moment that the crew need to make some kind of awareness test, because there is a door opening to this entire structure. That door happens to be the exterior hatch that was guarded by the young pilot. I believe that pilot was Oxley, I want to say, who had piloted the shuttle down here. But Oxley, unfortunately, is no longer responding. So the ambassador is going to make a roll. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with how we do rolls on the game, or in the game, I should say, we roll 2d20. And hopefully we roll 2d20. We roll 2d20, and you should see them coming up there on the screen for you now. Courtesy of dddice.com, dddice.com, beg your pardon. And we have to get under a combination of numbers. Now, those numbers are drawn from our attributes and our disciplines for the ambassador. For the rest of the crew, it is drawn from the ship's values of ship systems and departments. So in order to hear a door being opened on the other side of a science facility, whilst the main core of this facility is slowly overloading, I would say that is going to require a presence, no, let's say insight, 9 for the ambassador. And then I would say security, which is 2. So that puts him on a standard 11. So now I'm going to roll the 2d20 and see. We have to get, if we get both dice below 11, which we did not, then we would have had momentum. If both dice are above 11, then we would have had threat. Or if we roll a natural 20 on any one of the dice. So as a result, we've got 1 success and 1 failure, which is absolutely fine. Like, success still counts. That's all that we need. So with the success, the ambassador stops his explanation of the Vulcan telepathic enhancing device and pauses for a moment. I believe that we are no longer alone. I surmise that if this was part of the USS Plato's crew, they would have contacted us in some way, shape, or form to allow us to know that they are approaching. This may not be a friendly that approaches. The first officer immediately signals to Bacchus and to Winkler to take up positions on either side of the control room door. The ambassador, not too concerned with the safety of the crew, more concerned with the safety of the entire planet and the safety of the USS Plato, which is currently containing the secret technology that they are busy working on, this hollow projection designed to defeat the Borg in some shape or form. The ambassador, following true to the mission comes first value, turns back to the core and starts to look deep into the programming to see if he can understand more about what is going on with this particular system. It is not long before there is the sound of shuffling feet and the scanning, pitched noises of the Ferengi devices, handheld scanning devices, as they make their way down through the system, cataloging their profit that they are going to make from salvaging whatever this thing is. At the moment, the door opens and the diminutive form of a Ferengi is silhouetted in the door. The first officer indicates that no one should fire first. No one ever fires first in the Federation. But instead she rises and says, and while she's saying this, I would like all of you, please, to just type in some random Ferengi names that the Ferengi might be, because the daimon Methlik himself has not come down. Uncharacteristically of Ferengi captains, Methlik never leaves his ship. This is his personal choice. He believes that no bounty is worth the value of his ship, so he will never leave his ship in the hands of his first officer. Instead, he will send his first officer down. Just the Mon, not the daimon. But I do need a name for the daimon, for the Mon, please. So if you would, chat. The first officer looks over at the Ferengi, and she says, "My name is Commander Nrock. I am the first officer of the USS Plato. I welcome you to this device, but gentlemen, I should let you know, everything is incredibly unstable, and I would recommend that we vacate as soon as possible." The Ferengi snorts for a whole bunch of reasons, including some rather old-fashioned and outdated Ferengi thinking. With a snarl, one of the other Ferengi, directly behind the first one, for there are 5 of them, grins and says, "Why is the human female wearing clothing? This is disgusting." The one in the front, the Mon, by the name of Gon, thank you, Hunter, Gon steps forward I do not care. This is ours. We have taken this facility by the rights of salvage. I am gone. One of the other Ferengi crewmen snigger. And I claim rights. You are all trespassers. Leave immediately. I do not think you understand the situation, presses the first officer, desperate to try and impress upon this Ferengi that this entire structure is ready to blow. She is going to use for that, she is going to use comms, because she has to, and command, which also puts her on an 11, as she tries to convince this Ferengi desperately to leave. Well, she gets one success, which works in her favor, I guess, as she makes this roll. The Ferengi looks at her and he glares and glowers as she tries to explain this entire situation. I do not think you understand me correctly, Human. You must leave immediately. This is ours. Whilst the first officer continues to try and impress upon the Ferengi, I think it is important to point out that Star Trek had the Ferengi treat their females in a very chauvinistic kind of way to make a point about chauvinism and capitalism as well. And if you watch the TV series, you'll notice how the Ferengi evolved throughout the course of Deep Space Nine. And eventually, and quite rightly so, got to the point where they realized that females were absolutely equal to males. And of course, clothing was still a cultural taboo, nonetheless. So that's where that comes from, just in case you are wondering why that particular comment came up. It was a particular nuance of the Ferengi for quite some time in the show. Meanwhile, aboard the very damaged Captain Plato, Captain Aldrin stands over the smoking hulk that once was the science console. Damage report. Give me status. Ensign Andrews looks up. I'm afraid it's not good, Captain. We've only got 23% power coming from the core. Impulse engines are half impulse at best. Weapons are offline. We have no shields. The first officer, the captain, looks then to the security officer, Mabanal. I want you to tell me that we at least have torpedoes. I cannot imagine that we wouldn't be able to fire torpedoes. If these Ferengi come after us, Mabanal responds in his usual way. All of our offensive systems are offline, Captain. We have no means of defending ourselves. My advice would be for us to remain hidden in this asteroid field in the hopes that the away team might be able to salvage something from the surface and make contact with us. I have already launched a communications buoy to attempt to override the gravimetric distortions that are affecting the entire system. What little sensors we have left indicate that the gravitational waves are getting bigger. I assume that the team on the surface are doing all that they can. The captain taps her comm badge in exasperation. Netug, give me something. Give me anything. Give me some good news, please. I need to know. Best response time, best time to repair the ship, please. Just to give me impulse, full impulse. I'll take whatever you can give me.
Captain, there is much work that needs to be done. I would say 8 hours, at least.
The captain hangs her head for a moment. There is no point in shouting. There is not much that she can do. I'll be in my ready room, if it's still there, she says, and she heads to her ready room. There is a familiar little chirp, a friendly little greeting, and her face, even though it is covered in blackened soot, softens for just a moment, as pelting its way over the roughened-up carpets is the sleek form of Bobo, the captain's otter. It must have sensed the captain's distress, as it usually does, and it has come bounding over, hoping for cuddles and hugs, and perhaps just once a small morsel of crab from the replicator. The captain looks at the replicator and sees the black hulk that had burnt out when there was an explosion in the EPS manifold just behind it. There is no chance of crab. But cuddles certainly ensue. As she takes her seat, she looks at the displays that are flickering and stuttering all around her. This was not a good engagement. They were meant to be going on a simple test of the holographic systems, not on some exploration mission into gravimetric distortions. It didn't make sense what was going on. What was happening down on that planet? She could only hope that the crew were faring better down on the planet than the ship was. It's at that point that the entire ship screeches loudly as what passes as a red alert warning klaxon tries to sound in her room. With a little shrill shriek, Bobo leaps from her arms and takes 2 strides and plunges into the water vent access that leads into the larger water systems around the ship. The captain wearily looks up and then taps her comm badge. What is it now? Mon Gon has had no luck in convincing the first officer to leave. The first officer has had no luck in convincing Mon Gon to leave either.
If you do not leave by the time I have finished counting to 3, I will tell my men to open fire. We have a right to protect what is ours, Human.
I have told you, this facility is about to explode. Everything that you see here, plus the entire star system, will be destroyed if you do not leave immediately. She's tried persuasion, that didn't work. The Ferengi captain is exasperated, as is she, and he decides that it's time to take things into his own hands. The Ferengi first officer, not the captain. And so he lowers a very nasty-looking disruptor rifle at the first officer. 5. The first officer looks to Bacchus and to Winkler, and she gives them a nod. They both lower their phaser pistols and stand up.
4.
She looks back at the ambassador. The ambassador gives her a look and then says, if we leave, none of us will survive. The system is going to overload again. It appears that all that we did was buy ourselves a few minutes. I thought it would be hours. I was mistaken. If we don't stop this now, none of us will get out alive.
3.
With that, the first officer dives into Mon Gon, desperate to try and buy some time for the ambassador to work out what's going on. So she's going to make an attack. That's going to be weapons, I guess, plus security, which once again puts us on a solid 11. As she dives forward, desperate to knock out the Ferengi. Oh, no! Oh, well, we got a meet. We got an 11, which is a meet, and we got 1 failure. So she desperately tries to knock out this Ferengi. The Ferengi will resist with weapons and security, and I happen to have the Ferengi stats over here. We were using the Constellation class. So its weapons are 8, and its security is 3, which once again puts us firmly on an 11. So the Ferengi is going to try and resist the exact same roll. We got 1 meet and 1 failure. The Ferengi did exactly the same, so it's a standoff between the first officer and the Ferengi. There's no damage taken there. Winkler and Bacchus both take on a Ferengi each, and there is a major scuffle that is happening. No one is firing disruptors or phasers yet, thankfully. The Ferengi are smart enough to realize that if they discharge a weapon this close to the core, there is significant risk that everything goes up in smoke. At the same time, the Federation officers are not firing because they haven't been given the order to fire yet. This is still just an attempt to use muscle to convince the Ferengi what to do. The ambassador is desperately trying to work out how to channel this so that no one or nothing gets destroyed. And for that, it's going to take him reason and science. 13 is what he's going to have to roll. But, now this is something that you can add into the book, is I'm going to say that it's a difficulty 1 challenge. So it's a 13, but what that does is that lowers his actual value. So it lowers it to a 12. It lowers it by 1. So it goes down to a 12. So he's got to get under a 12. Oh my goodness! Scraping through on a 12 and a 14. That's 1 success. It's a partial success. It's not going to count. He's going to make no progress on that one. No progress on that one whatsoever. As he tries to figure out what he can do. What possibly could he do? What could he do? Now, it's at this point that the engine of this entire thing has gotten so powerful in terms of its buildup that it releases another gravimetric distortion. And that distortion ripples out across the station. The effects are lessened to those on the actual station itself. But I want to know, what delusion does the first officer suddenly undergo as she gets hit by this wave of telepathic energy? Write up a little something that she can be suddenly stuck inside of, that she needs to figure her way out of. Winkler is immune to it, and Bacchus has already inoculated himself with an extra dosage of radiation poisoning, which will also reduce it. But the first officer hasn't yet had that. What is happening to Nrock as this wave of telepathic energy washes over her? The ambassador is immune. And so figure out what that is happening. Whilst the battle is happening behind the ambassador and he's still trying to work out what this entire station is about, in space, the USS Plato on now red alert. It's on red alert, and the captain storms back onto the bridge. What do you mean they found us? I thought they retreated and went back to the planet. Mabinal looks up. I have no good news other than to say that the Marauder is back. Obviously, whatever they were doing on the planet, they have, I'm assuming, dropped off their crew or an away team. This would make the most sense. And now they have returned to find another prize. And that prize would be us. We have very little to respond with, Captain. The captain looks around. Scanners, sensors are down. Impulse is only barely operational. Warp drive burnt out. No shields. No phaser banks. No torpedoes. Well, maybe not no torpedoes. Tell me, Mr. Mabinal, I understand the torpedo launchers are not working. Is that correct? No, the launchers are fine, but there is no targeting systems. We'd be firing directly in front of us. It would be a fool's errand to use them. Well, it might be. Are those fancy holographic projectors of the ambassador still online? They were on a separate system, weren't they? Yes, the holographic systems are still operational. Well, they haven't been initiated, but they are still operational according to the feed out, he says as he taps his fingers lightly over the panel. Well, I think we might just have ourselves a chance. I do not understand what you are implying, Captain. We fire torpedoes straight ahead of us or straight out the back. There's no option of aiming. I would be setting the detonation sequence based on a guess. We have no shielding. Yes, we would look like something else. Well, I'm just going to hope here that this Daimon Metlik has got a little more sense in his head than he has greed. I want you to initiate the holographic imaging. And I'm going to send you the spec, she says as she slumps back down into the captain's chair and starts punching in information into her ARM console that she is going to send to the chief of security. And meanwhile, the first officer is staring in disbelief at her hands. They're covered in black soot. All around her, the warning klaxon of the USS Intrepid, a ship that she once served on, is blaring. Suddenly a red dot traces an indelicate circle over her palm. She looks up in terror and sees lurching towards her one of the cadaverous Borg, operated by machinery that is buried deep within its pallid flesh. She scrabbles backwards, desperate to try and get away, only to discover that the door behind her is sealed. The Borg advances relentlessly. She screams out, frantic to try and find a weapon to defend herself with. She finds, to her horror, that there is nothing nearby except for the body of the young ensign who has just recently perished. Grabbing the body, she lifts it up with all of her might, hopefully. This is going to be a structure plus security, so 12 for her. And launches the body at the Borg. With fantastic success. The body falls in such a way that the Borg becomes entangled completely. Its servo arm spinning wildly, its nanotubules projecting into this corpse as it seems to think that perhaps the corpse is still alive. Maybe there is just enough of a pulse still in this young ensign to fool its senses. With that, the first officer manages to slip her way around the Borg and head deeper into the damaged Intrepid. She remembers this nightmare. She has been here before, or is this the first time that she was here? It certainly feels like it. But then suddenly she steps into a room and there is a single grand piano, illuminated by a light cast from the ceiling. There is a hush, and she takes her seat in front of the keyboard. She becomes aware that she's surrounded, at least in the distance, surrounded by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, all desperately waiting for her to begin playing her concerto recital. She's been practicing for months. She still hasn't yet locked down Rachmaninoff's third piano concerto to her liking. She practices it every night in her sleep, her fingers pulling at her blankets as she sleeps. She begins to play. The music builds, rises and falls in epic passions as the pianist pours her heart and soul into the keyboard, the piano strings vibrating with the emotion of the piece. As it builds and builds and builds and crescendo, she marvels at how her fingers seem to know exactly where to go without her thinking. The notes pull themselves out of her and dash themselves upon the base of the piano's strings. There is a moment where she feels as if she and the music are both entwined, becoming one. Then, for just a moment, she looks down and to her horror discovers that she is completely naked. The music immediately crashes to a defiant end, and she looks up in terror as everyone in the audience starts to laugh and point at her. In order for her to get out of this situation, she is going to have to make another check, and that will bring us to the end of this particular chapter, as she needs to make this will be computers plus science, so once again an 11. I would like to play this again and see if 11 is the standard number. One success there. The first officer manages to pull herself out of this nightmare of this horrific space that she's in. The Borg, all laughing at her, suddenly disappear and melt into this hideous face of the Ferengi as he is rolling over, clutching his own large head, lost in some horrific nightmare of his own. Meanwhile, the ambassador, and I must just lock off this one. We're doing 3 each, right? The ambassador, desperate to get this device to stop working, is going to make one final check. He is going to do something that is a little bit out of the norm. He's going to use his xenoanthropology plus his philosophy in a desperate attempt of daring. He is going to assume something about this species. And what he assumes is that this device must have a means of shutting down, and perhaps the way to shut it down might be psychically rather than mechanically. If this device is designed to enhance the psyche of the Vulcans that built it, then surely perhaps there might be some kind of mental or neural interface that he can use, rather than this crude console, which defeats him at every turn. So he's going to use daring, and he is going to use command to try and get through this. That puts him on a 13 that he needs to succeed. And so here we go. He just needs a 13. Oh, no! Double failure. Double failure. Did not need that. Did not need that. Great. So now we get a threat. And that threat, I'm going to just say that threat, that gives the Ferengi a +1 to their next difficulty value, because that's something that you can do. So whatever the Ferengi do next, that is what's going to happen. And so with this horrific failure of the ambassador, he tries to have a neural interface, but the Vulcans are the ones that are known for their telepathy, not the Romulans. The Romulans are not. They don't know too much about this. Their passions still boil within them. And Vremik is fuming at this moment in time. This is an insufferable device. He shouldn't be here. He should be testing out holographic technology. That's what he should be doing. Meanwhile, whilst he cannot work this thing out, in space, Daimon Methlik steeples his pudgy little fingers together as he smiles, licking his lips carefully in glee. I want that ship. Norway class. Not particularly interesting, but still worth something. The Orion Syndicate would probably buy it for a pretty profit. His crew nod in agreement. They probably would buy a Norway class for a pretty profit. And the Federation, well, the Norway is an important ship, but not a huge ship. The Decorah slowly moves through the asteroid field, being much larger than the Norway. Her engines, bright yellow, flaring, and slowly, but surely, they make their way deeper in. The warp trail of the Norway, plus all of her leaking plasmas and all of the other damage that the ship has done, makes following her trail very, very easy. There is a moment when the science officer pauses, checks his readings, checks them again. Methlik, ever observant of his troops. What is it? Morg. Morg looks up.
If I'm reading these sensors correctly, your magnificent Daimonness, unfortunately, I think the Federation managed to get some backup because,
Well, have you found the Norway? Is there another ship with them?
No, not exactly, Daimon Metlik. It's more a case of, there's just, well, you see, it's a Borg cube, sir.
A Borg cube? Where the hell did that come from?
Looming large behind one of the larger asteroids is this large Borg sphere. Certainly not a cube, but it is a sphere. And the sphere is imposing enough, especially against a marauder. The sphere slowly rotates out with that large green array of theirs and looms over the Decorah. Let us hope that this now works. So the Decorah is going to have to make its own checks here. And here we go. It's going to have to make a sensors and I would say science check, give or take. Science or security doesn't really matter. So guess what their number is? It's an 11. But because they had threat, it becomes a 12. So
I'm running extra scans now, Daimon. I'm just checking. Oh, wait. There's an erratic power signature.
What do you mean, an erratic power signature? Is it a Borg cube or not?
No, sir. It's not a cube. I think the Federation classified this as a sphere.
Oh, that's so much better. Thank you so much, Dr. Morg. You may go.
No, sir. The erratic readings. The gravity signature is incorrect.
Gravity signature? What difference does that make?
Well, sir, if the ship doesn't weigh as much as it should,
then it means it's not the same ship. So what is it?
sitting calmly in her chair, and having made sure that the Norway is now pointed directly at the Decorer, is the captain. You may fire, Mr. Marbernell. Hit them with everything that we have. Marbernell does his best guess to try and hit this ship, and he fires. I am going to give him a -2 to his roll in terms of what he has to roll under. Now, the ship, we know it's going to have to be weapons of 9, and this would be security of 2. So he's firing torpedoes at a 9. That's what he's got to get, is a 9. He gets a 2. He gets a 2. All right. This is brilliant. This is what he wants. Okay. So, brilliant stuff. One torpedo bursts out, and the whole hologram seems to shimmer slightly as the torpedo passes through it, heading directly towards the Decorer class ship of the Ferengi. The second torpedo goes wide, spiraling out of control. Everybody watches as that first torpedo sails directly towards the Ferengi. And as it flies towards the Ferengi, I have completely forgotten the combat tracker. Excuse me. As this torpedo flies, the red light streaming in a tale of death and destruction, hopefully. They've got 1 success, so we apply that as a hit to the opposition. And the Decorer class cruiser, if you recall, she was a scale 4, and so she has 4. She had 3 left, so now she only has 2 left. She has 2 hull points left. And if you remember, the Norway has 2 left as well. Of her 5, she lost 3, whereas the Decorer only lost 2. The Decorer takes the damage, and there are explosions and sparks all over the place.
Return fire! Return fire! Destroy them!
Shouts Methlik. Meanwhile, Aldrin is standing up, her hand clutched to her arm rest of her chair. Continue to fire, Mr. Marbernell. Everything we have, throw the goddamn kitchen sink at them if we have to. I do not want to see that ship in front of me. We cannot leave our men, and we cannot get out of the system before those waves take us out. There is no other option. Marbernell nods gravely. No pressure whatsoever. On the Ferengi ship, the Ferengi are doing exactly the same thing. Blind panic consumes them. With that hit, they get to return fire. At the same time, that the Plato does. So their attack, weapons of 8 and security of 3, puts them on an 11. So here they go, firing at the Norway. No hits at all. The phaser beams fire out at this sphere as the Ferengi Decora is trying to make contact, but not realizing that it is actually the Norway with that sleek, slick, streamlined shape of the Norway is firing wide. The Norway, 2 more torpedoes sail out from Maribel. Again, he's got that -2, so he's only hitting on 9s or less. He fires. Torpedoes away, 1 hit. The Ferengi ship is down to 1 hull. On board, Daimon Methlik is screaming, "I want them destroyed!" However, he is going to have to make a command override for the rest of the crew.
No, sir, we are being destroyed. It's not, you can't, there's no point in making profit if you can't spend it. And we can't sell desiccated discs if we have nothing to desiccate,
is what the doctor is shouting. So the captain is going to have to make a command with, I would say, structure. So that's an 11 that he has to make to keep in the fight. He has to roll at least 1 11. Oh, he rolls doubles underneath. He stays in the fight. This is it. The Decora fires back. We know that she's attacking. Weapons of 8 and security of 3 puts her on an 11. She fires. A natural 20. That's what we want. The natural 20. She fires. The blast slams into one of the asteroids, completely missing the Norway altogether. And as it does, a shower of rubble and rock just explodes out in all different directions, completely obscuring the entire area and battering the hull of the Ferengi ship with dust particles, microasteroids. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us a +1. So when Maribel presses that fire button one last time, instead of rolling a 9, he needs to roll a 10 or below. He fires those last 2 torpedoes and gets a 1, which is enough. The Decora explodes outwards. The central crescent pushed back into the main housing. The warp core of the Ferengi starts to go critical. Escape pods jettison out in all different directions as there is this titanic explosion which rips outwards, destroying asteroids, turning them into dust, vaporizing them in a trail of fiery destruction as the Norway, desperately using her half impulse, brings up the underside of her, trying to turn into the wave that was the bow, trying to turn her bow away from the wave so she can ride the shockwave back towards the planet. That's how desperate the captain is. And on that note, we go back down onto the planet. So the ship's name is the USS Plato. It is a Norway-class ship. Norway-class ship. So, yes, on the planet, the first officer is still wrestling with Mongon, whilst the ambassador has made no work, no leeway, no progress whatsoever in overcoming this. The space battle above them, they're completely oblivious to. The first officer raises up her fist, and with a weapons and security on an 11, she tries to knock out this Ferengi. She gets a double success. Pah! Mon gone. Knocks backwards, his delusion still playing everywhere. And the first officer rises up, picking up his disruptor rifle and pointing it at the other Ferengi, who've been tussling with Bacchus and Winkler. I feel like this is the moment where everything is turning. And in desperation, the first officer turns to the ambassador. "Mr. Ambassador, I beg of you, we must either leave now or you must tell me that this system can be shut down. If you cannot shut it down, then we must leave. This is not worth our lives." With her double success, we've actually gathered momentum. And so the ambassador looks at these dials, at these consoles, at this telepathic system. It is something that must work. It must have logic to it. There must be some logic. He has to find the logic. And so to find that logic, he is going to use reason. And he is going to use reason and science. He takes a moment. The world around him and the first officer, the Ferengi, who are all shuffling, slowly surrendering, fade away. And it is just him and that console. He needs a 13 or less to succeed. He has the momentum, so that means he needs a 14 or less to succeed. And he gets it. He gets it. He suddenly realizes this is the entire problem. It is not a logical machine. The Vulcans who built it left Vulcan because Surak was preaching logic. The system is designed to operate more like a body than it is designed to operate like an engine. I didn't see it before, but now it is so clear. All we need to do, and his hands fly across the consoles. And as they do, there is a low-pitched grinding noise. And this builds a little bit. The first officer steps forward. Ambassador, just a moment. I think I have nearly shut this thing down. With a few more deft strokes on the old panel, suddenly the entire space goes dark. A few moments later, the door leading to the outside of the structure is pulled open. And the Ferengi who were on the little Ferengi pod, supposedly on guard duty, watching young Ensign Oxley, are taken by surprise as first Mongon steps out and then the first officer, Diva Nrock, steps out after him.
Lower your weapons. The humans have won.
The first officer gives Oxley a nod. We are leaving this planet immediately. Mr. Oxley, can you fly? Oxley nods. He has a black eye, but he seems to be okay. The doctor takes a quick glance, gives a nod to the first officer, and the Ferengi board their shuttle, and the Federation members board theirs. Mongon is still with the Federation, however. The first officer is not leaving him behind. The Ferengi are given instructions to return to their ship and to inform Daimon Methlik that Mongon will be a guest of the USS Plato until such time as this entire unfortunate misunderstanding can be worked out. Young Oxley needs to take the shuttle up through the thick atmosphere and the gamma radiation and get her to safety. We literally have 3 rolls left to make before we finish this entire narrative. So he is going to make his, let's say, computer plus science, which is an 11. He's going to make an 11 check to pilot the shuttle. Oh, doubles. Oh, with ease. With ease. Absolutely, with ease. With the confidence of a pilot, Oxley takes the shuttle up through the gamma radiation, which is already starting to dissipate. And deeper and deeper and deeper. I can see what you mean about the dice on the face. And deeper into space. In space, there is no sign of the Plato, nor is there any sign of the Ferengi ship. The Ferengi shuttle, on the other hand, that can be seen slowly pausing as if to scan for their home, or at least for their home ship. There is none to be found, however. Inside the shuttle, with 2 successes remaining, hopefully, Oxley is frantically scanning. The ambassador takes his seat next to Oxley And we'll try and do the same thing. This will use, let's say, reason on 10 and science on 3. So 13 once again. I'm widening the search. Another under the value. I have located the Norway. I have located the Plato. She appears to be on an intercept course, although it does not appear as if she's moving faster than half impulse. I wonder if she was damaged, perhaps, by that last gravitational wave. I'm uncertain. The shuttle flies towards the Norway-class ship, and everybody aboard is aghast. The damage that the Norway has suffered is huge. There are large scorch marks that litter across her hull, and one of the Bazard's scoops is no longer illuminated. Oxley indicates that the ship probably will be incapable of going to warp. Eventually, the shuttle does manage to dock with the Plato, and once everybody has been seen to by the chief medical officer in what remains of the medical lab, there is an opportunity, after 12 hours, for everyone to gather in the briefing room. "So what you are telling me," says the captain as she stares at her entire contingent of officers and the ambassador, "is that that device was not intended ever to create gravitational waves, but it was generating them as a byproduct of not being used to create some kind of telepathic link?" The ambassador rises. "I do believe that was the original intention of the builders, was to create a planet-wide telepathic web, linking all of the members together as a single entity. You must remember that the Vulcans before Surak were an incredibly violent species that had nearly annihilated themselves multiple times in war. I suppose this particular branch felt that it was better to form a single collective mind, one where violence would simply not exist. There were no individuals on this planet, merely a single mind acting on behalf of the entire body of the populace. In one way, quite remarkable. I feel like I should point out," says Winkler, "it does sound to me awfully much like something that the Borg do, creating a single mind type of thing." The ambassador smiles. "Unlike the Borg, who require technology to assimilate anyone entering into the collective, I believe that anyone with the slightest amount of sentience, if they were to arrive on this planet, would automatically be consumed by the collective. Well, in that case, it sounds even worse than the Borg. Now, are you sure that you have shut this thing down permanently?" The ambassador nods. "I assure you, it is quite useless. The original design was flawed from the very beginning, and what remains down there now is nothing more than a relic to a lost civilization. However, I would recommend, simply for security reasons, that whatever torpedoes we have left, we target the planet's surface and we destroy the entire structure. This will be for the greater good, and then hopefully we might resume our mission." The captain looks over at the chief engineer. Gat looks back at her.
"We've prioritized the sensor arrays, so Mr. Mabanal should now be able to fire the torpedoes with accuracy."
The captain nods and dismisses everybody. Mabanal returns to his security station and fires 4 torpedoes directly at the structure on the planet's surface. It wipes out the entire system on the surface. It is only much later, when Ambassador Vremik is writing up his official report, that he adds in a small footnote He knew that the system would never be able to operate again, because keeping the entire system alive, which was what he only discovered towards the very end, was a singular ancient mind at the very heart of the system that had been powering and monitoring everything. The mind had gone completely mad, hence the gravitational waves and the damage that was being done. But it was technically a sentient Vulcan from several thousand years ago, kept alive by the technology. But the mission must always come first, and that kind of telepathic nonsense should best be left to the mystics. Romulans have no such truck with Vulcan mysticism anyway. Well, that's it, folks. We did it. We got through all of our rolls. We did 3 and 3 and 3. We got to the end. Yeah, I think that I had a lot of fun. I mean, it's super weird playing this on my own, by the way. I mean, I have a lot of fun doing all the different voices and trying to see where it can go and that kind of stuff. So if you have any suggestions on how we can do this differently, please write in the comments of this video. So if you're watching it again or anything along those lines, write in the comments how you think it could be done differently so it could be more interactive. Because I love interacting with you guys. And I do feel, though, that the whole thing does move a lot faster with the dice roller rather than me asking for numbers. But I was asking for less vote options, too, in this particular episode. But I was cognizant of the fact that I wanted to finish it in time. And that we've managed to do. Well, Elias Marpergenesis, I really appreciate that donation. Thank you so very much. I appreciate you. I appreciate that donation as well. Thank you. So have a think. Have a think. Now, just as point of order, there will be no show next week because that's Tuesday the 26th, and I will be in transit from the little holiday break that we're going on. There won't be a show on the 2nd either, because the 2nd is just after the 1st, which I know happens every month, so that's no surprise. But the 1st, we've got guests coming over and that sort of thing, and I think the 2nd might be a little bit premature to start on that one. So we'll be looking to resume normal programming from the 9th of January. Hopefully you'll join me for that one. And we'll decide then and there what we want to do. We will decide what we want to do on that one. So let's talk. Let's talk on Discord. Let's talk on all social media. Let me know what you want to know. And remember, if you haven't hit that like button, to hit that like button already. Lets me know that you do like the show, that you wanted to carry on. Drake, can you post a video on how you prepare and run this? Is this more linearly created, or do you come up with the majority of this on the fly? So, Drake, I'm happy to do a video on this. I'm happy to do that. Dolphin316. Oh my goodness. Right. Fabled Lands. Oh goodness. Fabled Lands. That was an experience. We died so many times. Fabled Land, you die so many times. Fabled Lands could be a lot of fun to do. We might be able to do a Fabled Lands. Why not? I'm going to do a poll. I know we've done one here where you guys were like, yes, let's carry on doing the solo play. Happy to do that. I'm going to throw a poll together on the community tab of YouTube. Probably in the first week of January, where we'll do Lone Wolf, Fabled Lands, and Star Trek. And Drake, with regards to this whole thing, I am making up everything on the fly. There is no preparation whatsoever, aside from the very first episode where we're like, okay, let's make the names of the primary crew. We rolled up the ship's statistics. And then we actually rolled out a story, which was travel to the Gamma on-book system to explore gravitational waves, discover civilization and unusual power source. So these were steps that we rolled out based on what was provided in the book. Then we discover that it's a weapon and other nations have sent spies. And you go, well, sure. Finally, there was a loan of a prisoner and need to extradite him to another planet called Gordol Eri 4. Get prison and stop the weapon. So, of this whole bunch, this was the original plan. But as you go, whenever you have issues, whenever you don't roll 2 dice below the number you need to do, you have to roll on the random disaster table type of thing. And that set us on a different kind of course. But I would say of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 objectives, we got 5 of them. We stopped the weapon. The only thing that we didn't do was get a prisoner and have to extradite him. But everything that was happening, all the decisions that were being made, I was throwing that up based on what the book was giving me, but also based on this approach. And then if you look here on the character sheet, we've got this mission tracker, which they suggest 5 major points per beginning, per middle, and per ending of your story. And what I did was I said for every 5 rolls that we do, that would count towards one of these badges being ticked. So once we'd done 5 rolls, a badge would be ticked, regardless of where we were. So I was looking at it going, okay, we have now ticked the first 3. So the introduction is done. So whatever we come up with, that's it. We can't now add more to it in terms of the basic narrative, but we can add in the subplots. And that was where the Ferengi arrived. It was a subplot that we added in, but we knew that there were other nations with spies, so it kind of made sense for it to link into that. And then we just had the great big battle where the Plato got its ass kicked. And then we've been down to the planet where we were trying to figure out what the machine was. We didn't know. Nobody knew. I did not know what this was. My only note that I made was that I thought, and this was in my other book. This came up. I came up with this idea last week or last time I played. So this wasn't at the beginning. This was literally last week. I was going, what on earth could this device be that generates gravitational waves? Why would it generate gravitational waves? And looking at the notes, it was discover a civilization and an unusual power source, an unusual one. And I thought, well, part of me was like, okay, these are proto-Vulcans. Okay, cool. Let's make them proto-Vulcans because that's just what my mind did. And then I was like, okay, Vulcans. What do I know about Vulcans? And I was like, okay, well, they're all about this telepathy stuff. And I've just finished watching Enterprise again. And there was a lot of stuff on Surak and that sort of thing. And I thought, okay, well, what if this whole thing was to create a collective mind meld, kind of a Vulcan collective? That's quite a fun idea. And there was that wonderful episode with Captain Picard where they're chasing the Stone of Gol, trying to find the Stone of Gol, which was a telepathic enhancer. So it's not like it was out of canon range. That is one of the things that this book emphasizes quite a bit. And that's why, like I said, the first bunch of chapters is just Star Trek lore, basically. Is to try and say, well, you're running these games, you're running this improv stuff where there are no rails. You're not prepared. You can outline what you think the story is going to be about, but you just have to go with the flow. So how do you go with the flow? You look at the constraints, and the constraints in this case, we're dealing with a Star Trek constraint. And that has a whole bunch of rules. Federation can't fire first, for example. The Federation are all about exploring and understanding rather than interfering or destroying. Hence why the ambassador, who's Romulan, has this whole capacity to do what they needed to do. So it was about just working within those constraints, working within those capacities. So anyway, there we are, folks. My voice is going, which I expected. And so I want to wish you all a merry festive season, whatever you celebrate. If you celebrate anything, I hope you are able to do so and have a little smile on your face. If you pick up a copy of Star Trek Adventures and you do the Captain's Log thing, well, I've certainly had a lot of fun doing it, and hopefully you will as well. Until next time, however, I want to wish you and yours the very merriest of seasons, and until the new year, live long and happy gaming.